In a small town in the Philippines, a boy named Miguel lived in a modest home surrounded by the gentle hum of daily life. The streets were dusty, the nights quiet, and the world seemed much bigger than he ever felt he could reach. Miguel wasn't a particularly loud boy. He didn't boast or demand attention. He kept to himself, carrying a notebook full of scribbled lyrics, worn-out headphones, and a heart full of dreams. What made him different wasn't talent alone. It was a quiet determination, a fire he had inherited from watching 5 young men called SB19 light up stages across the world. Every evening, after finishing chores and homework, Miguel would retreat to his small room. The peeling paint on the walls was barely visible behind stacks of notebooks and posters of SB19. He'd put on his headphones, press play, and let their voices fill the space. He memorized every lyric, every beat, every movement in their dances. Sometimes his voice would crack, sometimes his hands would ache, but he kept going. He imagined that one day he would step onto a stage of his own and carry the same passion, the same hope, the same electricity that SB19 carried into every performance. His parents watched him with a mix of pride and worry. They didn't fully understand the world he was chasing. "Why not focus on school or work?" his father would ask. But Miguel didn't see it as a choice. Music was not just a hobby, it was a lifeline. Every note he sang, every rhythm he practiced was a step closer to proving to himself that dreams, no matter how big or impossible they seemed, could come true. At school, Miguel often felt invisible. He wasn't the star athlete or the class clown. He was the quiet kid who hummed tunes under his breath, scribbled lyrics on the edges of his notebook, and carried a small notebook full of dreams that felt too big for someone like him. But he didn't mind. He had SB19, and that was enough to fuel his nights and ignite his mornings. They weren't just idols, they were proof that talent, discipline, and relentless belief could break barriers no one thought possible. One afternoon, while scrolling through his phone, Miguel stumbled across an announcement that made his heart stop. Auditions for America's Got Talent were open. His fingers trembled as he read the words over and over. A chance to perform on the biggest stage in the world. His mind raced. Could he do it? Could a boy from a small town with nothing but a dream and a voice in his chest truly step into a theater filled with strangers and shine? For the first time, fear mingled with excitement. He could almost see himself under the bright lights, hear the roar of the crowd, feel the electricity of the judge's gaze. The weeks leading up to the audition were grueling. Miguel practiced relentlessly. Early mornings were spent memorizing lyrics, evenings filled with choreographing dance moves in front of his mirror, nights echoing with his voice singing softly until the moon hung high in the sky. He fell many times, stumbled over notes, and questioned if he was ready. Friends laughed, teasing him about chasing a dream too big. But Miguel didn't listen. He carried with him every lesson he had learned from watching SB19: dedication, resilience, humility, and above all, believing in yourself when no one else does. Finally, the day arrived. Miguel's heart raced as he stepped into the theater. The air was thick with anticipation, the lights blinding at first, the audience a sea of shadows. He could hear the faint rustle of whispers, the collective breath of hundreds waiting for someone to capture their attention. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and thought of the boys who had inspired him. If they could reach the world, maybe I can too. That thought steadied him. That thought gave him courage. The music began, soft at first, a gentle piano melody that built slowly like a heartbeat awakening. Miguel opened his mouth, and the first note escaped. trembling but pure. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, honest, and it carried every ounce of his passion. The audience leaned in, sensing the sincerity behind his voice. The judges exchanged glances, curiosity and surprise mingling in their expressions. There was something about this boy from a small town, this boy whose life had been quiet and unnoticed, that demanded attention. As Miguel continued, the confidence grew. He moved with the rhythm, each gesture natural yet precise, each word filled with meaning. He imagined the countless fans of SB19 cheering him silently, their energy surrounding him in the theater. The chorus arrived, powerful and soaring, and Miguel let himself feel every emotion, every story he had lived, every struggle and hope woven into the melody. He could see it now, the faces in the audience, their expressions softening, eyes widening, hands clapping, some even rising from their seats. Among them, he noticed a figure who had built a career on being unflappable, on never showing weakness, Simon Cowell. For a brief moment, Miguel's breath caught. Simon's face softened, his usual stern composure melting into something almost human, almost vulnerable. Miguel didn't know it yet, but every note he sang was touching hearts, breaking through walls, and reaching even the most guarded of souls. The final verse approached. Miguel poured everything he had into it, the late nights, the sacrifices, the quiet tears in his room, the unwavering belief in a dream. Every word rang with honesty. Every movement carried purpose. By the time the last note lingered in the theater, silence fell for a heartbeat, a collective pause before the eruption, and then it came. The thunderous applause, the cheers, the gasps. The judges were on their feet. Simon Cowell, usually reserved, visibly fought to hold back tears, his hand over his heart. In that moment, Miguel understood something profound. This was not just a performance. This was the culmination of every dream, every effort, every inspiration that had led him here. The applause echoed in Miguel's ears, but he barely noticed. He was lost in the music, in the story he was telling with every note, every breath. The stage lights bathed him in brilliance, and the audience, once a distant blur, now felt like a wave of energy rolling toward him. He imagined the faces of the SB19 members, their determination mirrored in his own, pushing him to go further, to reach higher, to believe that this moment, this one chance, could define more than just his performance. Miguel had always known that music was more than sound. It was feeling, it was connection. And tonight, he wasn't just singing for himself. He was singing for every kid from a small town, every dreamer who had ever been told no, every person who had felt too ordinary to be extraordinary. His voice grew stronger, richer, carrying layers of emotion that transcended the notes on the page. Each phrase told a story of struggle and hope, of quiet nights and relentless practice, of an unwavering belief that the impossible could be conquered. The audience was no longer simply watching, they were part of the moment. People whispered to each other, gasped, some with tears glimmering in their eyes. A woman in the front row clutched her chest, overwhelmed by the raw honesty in Miguel's performance. A teenager next to her wiped away tears, murmuring, "He's amazing. He's just like SB19. Every reaction fueled Miguel, gave him wings he hadn't known he had. He let himself move freely now, every gesture synchronized with the music, every step telling a story beyond words. The judges leaned forward, captivated. Their eyes followed every movement, every rise and fall of his melody. Simon Cowell, the man who had never been easily impressed, who had seen thousands of performers, could not look away. Miguel felt his intensity of his gaze, the subtle shift in expression, the almost imperceptible nods and widened eyes. He didn't need to see the golden buzzer yet. He knew the power of this moment lay in its authenticity. It wasn't about fame or reward, It was about telling a story through music that only he could tell. Halfway through the performance, Miguel felt a familiar flutter of doubt. The weight of expectation, the enormity of the stage, the countless people watching, his chest tightened for a moment. But then he remembered the countless hours he had spent practicing alone, the sacrifices he had made, the moments when he almost gave up but chose to push forward. He thought of SB19, of their resilience, of the way they had faced obstacles and still shone. And in that memory, he found strength. He straightened, lifted his chin, and poured every ounce of his soul into the next verse. The chorus hit again, more powerful than before. Miguel's voice soared, ringing through the theater, carrying emotion like a tidal wave. The audience rose, some standing in unison, clapping, cheering, moved by the sheer force of his passion. He could see faces illuminated by hope, some tears glistening, some wide-eyed with amazement. Each note he sang was a bridge connecting him to everyone in that room, every soul touched by a story of perseverance. Simon Cowell leaned back slightly, a rare expression crossing his usually composed face, his lips pressed together, eyes glistening, as if the music had found a place deep within him that few performances ever reached. Miguel couldn't see every subtlety, but he could sense the shift, the recognition, the awe. It was a moment that transcended competition. It was something profoundly human, a connection through music that required no words, no explanation, just feeling. As the bridge of the song approached, Miguel slowed his pace, letting the softer notes linger in the air. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what was next. He closed his eyes, imagining every small step that had led him here, every quiet night spent singing alone, every whispered word of encouragement from SB19's performances that had inspired him to dream bigger. He let the vulnerability shine through, the honesty in his voice carrying the weight of every moment, every struggle, every tear. The judges were silent now, captivated. The audience quieted, leaning in to catch every nuance. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed frozen, aware that something extraordinary was unfolding. Miguel's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the realization that he was living a dream that had once seemed impossible. This was his moment, the culmination of years of practice, hope, and unwavering belief. And then the final chorus. Miguel let go completely, every note ringing with clarity and emotion, every movement infused with intention. The music soared, the lights brightened, and the audience erupted, a wave of sound that seemed to lift him off the stage. People cheered, cried, clapped, and some stood in awe. Simon Cowell, normally the epitome of composure, placed a hand over his chest, visibly fighting back tears, struggling to hold in the emotions Miguel had stirred. The moment was electric, pure, unforgettable. When the last note faded, silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the applause returned, thunderous, resounding, filling every corner of the theater. Miguel's chest heaved with exhaustion and exhilaration. He had given everything, and it had landed exactly where it needed to. The judges stood, one by one, faces lit with admiration. Simon's eyes glistened, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Miguel felt tears sting his own eyes, overwhelmed by the culmination of years of dreaming, struggling, and believing. It was more than a performance. It was a story of hope realized, of dreams chased relentlessly, of a boy from a small town proving that with inspiration, dedication, and belief, the impossible could become reality. The echoes of SB19's influence were woven into every note, every movement, every heartbeat, and now they had carried Miguel to a place he had once only imagined. If Miguel's story inspires you, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone chasing their dreams. The crowd's cheers continued as Miguel took a quiet bow. He looked around the theater, absorbing the energy, the reactions, the faces that would forever remember this moment. In his heart, he knew that this was just the beginning. SB19 had sparked the flame, but he had fanned it into a fire that could not be contained. He was no longer just a boy from a small town. He was a performer, a storyteller, a dream realized before the world. The final notes of Miguel's song lingered in the theater like a gentle echo of a dream realized. He stood there, chest heaving, eyes glistening, soaking in the energy that surrounded him. The audience was on their feet, a sea of applause, cheers, and tears. The judges were standing as well, caught in a rare moment of genuine awe. Simon Cowell, the man whose expression had long been synonymous with composure, couldn't hide the emotion that had overtaken him. He wiped at his eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded, a subtle but powerful acknowledgement of the story he had just witnessed. Miguel lowered the mic for a moment, letting the applause wash over him. He wasn't performing for fame or recognition anymore. He was performing because he had something to share, a journey of perseverance, hope, and belief in the impossible. Every late night practicing alone, every sacrifice, every tear had led to this moment, and now it was real. The dream that had once seemed so distant had materialized on one of the world's largest stages. As he stepped forward to leave the stage, the audience continued to cheer. People called out words of encouragement and admiration. Parents, kids, and even complete strangers were united in celebration of someone who had refused to let circumstances define his potential. Miguel felt a profound sense of connection, not just with the audience, but with every young dreamer who had ever felt unseen or unheard. He thought of SB19, whose performances had inspired him, and he silently thanked them for igniting the spark that had led him here. One of the judges spoke, their voice trembling with emotion. "Miguel, that was extraordinary. You didn't just perform a song, you told a story, and you moved every single person in this theater." Simon Cowell leaned forward, eyes shining, and added, "I've seen thousands of performers, but what you just did, it's rare, truly rare. You have a gift, and more importantly, you have heart. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Miguel's lips curved to a small smile, the weight of the moment pressing against his chest. He had worked so long for this, dreamed so relentlessly, and now he could feel that every challenge, every doubt, every lonely night had been worth it. He was no longer just a boy from a small town. He was a storyteller, a performer, a symbol of hope for anyone who dared to dream. If Miguel's story inspires you, leave a comment below telling us who inspires you to chase your dreams. The crowd's cheers grew louder as he walked off the stage, still breathing heavily, still absorbing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The applause didn't fade immediately. It lingered like a warm embrace. Miguel knew that this moment would stay with him forever, but he also knew it was more than just a personal victory. It was proof that inspiration could ripple outward, that one person's journey could awaken hope in countless others. Backstage, Miguel allowed himself a moment of reflection. He sank into a chair, still in his costume, letting the adrenaline and emotions settle. He thought of the small room where it had all begun, the cracked mirror, the notebooks filled with lyrics, the countless hours of practice. He thought of the people who had doubted him, the obstacles he had faced, and the moments when giving up had seemed easier than continuing. And through it all, he had kept moving forward, guided by the spark SB19 had ignited inside him. The director called him back to the stage for a brief interview. The cameras caught every detail, the sweat on his brow, the gleam in his eyes, the subtle tremble in his voice. "Miguel, you've just inspired so many people watching around the world. How does it feel to perform your heart out on a stage like this?" Miguel smiled softly, his voice steady but full of emotion. "It feels like I finally understand why dreams are worth chasing. SB19 inspired me, but this moment reminds me that anything is possible if you never give up." The judges nodded, their faces reflecting pride and admiration. Simon Cowell leaned back, a rare smile gracing his features, and said, "Keep believing, Miguel. Keep pushing. You've touched hearts tonight, and that's something no one can ever take away from you." Miguel's smile widened. He knew that the words weren't just compliments, they were a reminder that the path ahead, while challenging, was full of possibilities. As the interview ended, Miguel turned toward the audience once more. He raised his hand in a small wave, letting the energy of the crowd wash over him. He felt the connection deeply, the understanding that he was no longer alone in his journey. People across the theater, across the world had witnessed his story, and that story was now theirs as well. If you were inspired by Miguel's journey, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to follow more stories like this. Don't forget to like and share to inspire someone today. Later, as he left the theater and stepped into the cool night air, Miguel allowed himself to breathe freely. The city lights stretched out before him, a reminder that the world was bigger than he had ever imagined. And yet, tonight, he had claimed a piece of it. He remembered SB19 one last time, whispering a thank you in his heart. Their music had given him courage. Their story had given him hope. And now he was ready to give back, to perform, to inspire, and to remind others that no dream is too small, no town too quiet, no voice too soft to make a difference. Miguel knew this was just the beginning. The stage was not an end point, it was a starting line. And with every note, every step, every heartfelt performance, he would carry with him the lessons, the inspiration, and the belief that had brought him here. He had dreamed, he had persevered, and he had triumphed. And now the world had seen that a boy from a small town, inspired by SB19, could rise and shine brighter than he had ever imagined.